With that, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. And let's see if I can get this up to where I can read it. Okay. So our first speaker is Dr. Ted Achacoso. Achacoso, okay, good. And Dr. Achacoso is a man who never takes himself too seriously or his work too seriously. He's a college graduate. He was a college graduate in biology at the age of 18 and a doctor of medicine at the age of 22. And he's the founding pioneer of the clinical practice of health optimization medicine and practice, as these abbreviations HOME and HOPE, which is the direction and correction of imbalances at the level of the metabolome. Dr. Ted is extremely lucky with his mentors. He was mentored by Thierry Hertoge, I may be butchering these names, who's the founding pioneer of anti-aging medicine and nutritional medicine. Dr. Ted is a double board certified in Paris. And he is mentored by William S. Yamamoto, having a little hard time reading this, the founding pioneer of medical informatics and an artificial intelligence researcher in Washington, D.C. He was also mentored by, Dwayne Silby, the founding pioneer of socially responsible investing and finance in Washington, D.C., and also mentored by 3 Philippine pioneers in interventional neurology, and pharmacology, toxicology in Manila. So, and his representative body of work includes a book containing the first ever neural circuitry database, or connectome, as they call it, for an organism, journal articles, US patents, software, grants and recorded interviews, podcasts, and speaking engagements in the area of artificial etiology, computational neuroethology, biomathematical modeling of nervous systems, and computability of consciousness. I'm going to start right there. It goes on, very impressive. Please welcome Dr. Ted Achacoso.
Thank you for the introduction. And despite that long introduction, people really asked me what's the essence of Dr. Ted. And I said I'm after 1 cent solutions. So there's this story, and some of you may already have heard it, that the Buddha and the Guru were walking at the bank of Enlightenment River. And the middle of Enlightenment River was, of course, Enlightenment Island. And the Guru said to the Buddha, "Hey, Buddha, you know, I studied levitation at Levitation Island for 30 years. Now I can just walk on water and reach Enlightenment Island." And the Buddha looked at the Guru and said, 30 years? That's such a long time to study something. Why did you do that? The ferry costs only 1 cent. So this health optimization medicine and health optimization practice, Home and Hope, is my 1 cent solution to health. So health optimization medicine is a clinical framework to include health management in disease management practice. Our slogan is, "Let's bring medicine home." So all of us know from our illness medicine physicians that the body is made up of organs, and the organs are actually tested, for their function. And many of my alcoholic patients actually know how to read liver function tests better than I do. And because we can test for the organ functions like that of the liver. Now, underneath these organs are the specialized cells. For example, the hepatocytes for the liver, the cartilage cells of the ligaments, the neurons of the brain cells. And are there clinical tests for specialized cell function? Sure, there are. For example, if you want to test for the endocrine function of the pancreas, if you want to take a look at insulin action, then you take a look at the fasting blood glucose, right? Now, but we all know that underneath the organs, underneath the specialized cells, is the basic cell or the fundamental cell. Now, are there clinical tests for basic cell functions? In other words, can we test clinically for the health status of the basic cell common to all the specialized cells of all organs? And this is where health optimization medicine is. Health optimization medicine takes care of the basic cell that has a nucleus, cytoplasm, microtubules, endoplasmic reticulum, and all the other things that we learned in grade school biology now. Now, we can test for basic functions through clinical metabolomics because as it turns out, the basic cell throws out a set of network metabolites, which we can now measure because of advances in technology. And it looks like this. For example, if you want to take a look at the metabolism of your carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, this is what's happening inside your cell, right? Now, illness medicine is just like having a flat tire. You know, when you go to your physician, you already have a flat tire. And we are told that the body does not come with maintenance and warning lights. It does. We just didn't know where to look. And it turns out that where we need to look is at the level of the metabolome, where it could give us an early warning. Now, the Human Metabolome Database, and I know most of you know about the Human Genome Database, but there's a Human Metabolome Database. And just quickly searching, for example, if you want to take a look at what's detected and quantified in urine for endogenous metabolites, filtered by the cell membrane, cytoplasm, nucleus, and mitochondria, there are only 820 metabolites. That's quite workable. Take a look at this. There are about 92,252 endogenous metabolites, and these are both detected and quantified and detected and not quantified. Food metabolites, about 32,500. Microbial metabolites, 171. Drug metabolites, we like taking those, 2,472. Plant metabolites, 149. The fastest growing segment of the metabolome are the toxins and pollutants. And of course, the cosmetic metabolites. Watch it for those who wear cosmetics. It's 17 and also growing. Now, health optimization medicine and practice detects metabolite levels as maintenance and warning lights for the body. As we have seen earlier, exogenous metabolites from food, microbes, drugs, and plants and pollutants and cosmetics are coming in from the outside. Then we have endogenous metabolites from what I say are from 4 organisms in the body, which I shall discuss later. They are the anaerobic organism, aerobic organism, microorganism, and special organism. So both of these throw off network metabolites that are detectable and quantifiable. Health optimization medicine and practice proceeds from the cellular level. That's why we often get this disconnect with the illness medicine doctors because they're talking at the organ level, and here we are talking at the illness medicine level. So we would like to bridge that spectrum from organ to cell. So there are intracellular metabolites, there are extracellular metabolites, and there are intercellular metabolites. Intracellular metabolites are those like your cofactors, for example, and vitamins. Extracellular metabolites are like your toxins, and intercellular metabolites are your hormones. Now, for example, toxins can both be exogenous metabolites, meaning coming from the outside, and intercellular metabolites. This is a result of an actual patient where they open up a red blood cell, and of course, they find high mercury levels and high levels of cadmium, right? Now, as I said earlier, health optimization deals with balancing metabolites connected to each other in a network. So I said that we can consider the intracellular metabolites and intercellular metabolites as products of 4 organisms in our body: the aerobic organism, the anaerobic organism, the microorganism, and the special organism. So it is useful to view the body as having only 4 types of basic cells, or actually organisms that give off detectable and quantifiable network metabolites. This perspective is very important. So organisms 1 and 2, if you take a look at the human cell, is actually made up of 2 organisms, right? The one is the anaerobic organism, which doesn't use oxygen to produce energy, and its evolutionary origin is, of course, from the archaeobacteria, and of course, the mitochondria use oxygen to produce energy, and of course, they are actually endosymbionts, meaning they're also bacteria that are now residing inside our cells, and we have about 100 quadrillion of them. So this is a schematic. So we have anaerobic energy production by glycolysis, or the breakdown of your sugar, your glucose. And then there's the aerobic energy production, which is known as the Krebs cycle with the electron transport chain. Now, if you take a look at this diagram, you could see that your mitochondria are the only organelles inside your cell that can actually deal with your fatty acids. Now, if you want to take a look, this is an actual patient result again. So at the carbohydrate metabolism inside the cell, you could take a look. This is an actual test result of a patient. And you could see that there's lactic acid and pyruvic acid, which is products of anaerobic metabolism. And here, you could see the products of the aerobic metabolism or of the mitochondria, which is coming from the Krebs cycle. By the way, in health optimization medicine, I'm using the word patient, but we actually use the word client because the patient, from our assumption, is not sick. We don't look at it from the illness point of view. So we also know that cofactors are necessary to move the pathways forward. For example, we know that for pyruvate to be able to get inside the mitochondria, you need thiamine or vitamin B1. So we could measure these levels as well, and this is a sample test result of what you can get. This client has very high need for alpha-lipoic acid, thiamine, riboflavin, and folic acid. Borderline needs for those. And there is now an algorithm that determines exactly how much you would recommend to a patient. But if you are adjusting it for other reasons, then that's within the art of the practice. So I've said the word network so many times, and this is an example of network nutrients. This is the antioxidant regeneration pathway. You could see that vitamin E regenerates CoQ10, regenerates vitamin C, regenerates lipoic acid. You would hear of the previous study of 80,000 subjects where they said, well, it's a failure to prevent prostatic cancer with the high doses of vitamin E and selenium. Well, duh, if you take a look at this, you would see that you're actually increasing the sink for vitamin E without increasing the rest of the antioxidant regeneration pathway. You would just be accumulating rust or oxidation within vitamin E because it could not be processed by the smaller pools of antioxidants. Now, the specialized organism is the third organism and is the organism that produces hormones like neurohormones, neurotransmitters are neurohormones, and cytokines. And if you take a look at this client, you see vanillmandelic acid, which is a metabolite of epinephrine, homovanillic acid, metabolite of dopamine, and indole acetic acid, a metabolite of serotonin. And why is this important? Because now, in a urinary sample, instead of taking a brain biopsy, we can determine your levels, and we know that dopamine is responsible for your cognitive alertness, norepinephrine for your vigilant concentration, serotonin for sensory satisfaction, and the three of them go and affect your mood. So what about networked hormones? You have here cholesterol, produces pregnenolone, produces progesterone, produces aldosterone, cortisol, DHEA, testosterone, estradiol, and DHT. The joke that I like to put forth to cardiologists is that, you know, we invented statins 40 years ago, and 20 years later we had to invent Viagra because we just totally lowered everyone else's testosterone. Now, this is the fourth microorganism, which is actually the microbiota in the body. Now, I make a distinction between microbiome and microbiota. Microbiome is actually, I use it exclusively for the genome that's within the microbiota. If you take a look at this, we could, this bacteria inside our gut would throw out metabolites. DHPPA, for example, they found out in cohorts of children with autism, it's actually quite high. It comes from the Clostridium bacteria, which comes from the soil. And there's arabinose, which is, of course, a sugar that is put out by Candida yeast. So, for example, if you have your OBGYNs, you know, treating candidiasis, I tell them it will just go back over and over until you treat the candidiasis that's in the intestines, right? So It also turns out that the endosymbionts, which are your mitochondria, and your exosymbionts, which are microbiota, they talk to each other. And they can talk to each other via specific metabolites like short-chain fatty acids and so on, and they could regulate each other's activities. Now, these are new findings. These are bacteria that are talking to each other. And so, in summary, a useful and important perspective to view the body as having only 4 types of cells are actually organisms that give off detectable and quantifiable network metabolites. So you have the anaerobic organism, which is the nucleus cytoplasm, producing anaerobic energy via glycolysis. The aerobic organism, the mitochondrion, producing aerobic energy via the Krebs cycle. The specialized organism, cells that produce hormones and cytokines. And the microorganism, the microbiota, especially of the gut, they produce network metabolites. And of course, let's not forget the role of the exogenous metabolites. Now, this leads us to now a networked holobiont. I used to think that the human being was a superorganism, but superorganism only means that you're an aggregation of one species of bacteria. So a holobiont means you're coming from different species, right? And in 2013, the Nobel Prize was given to 3 Americans, actually, for their discovery that the bacteria can actually talk directly to the human cell. And this inter-kingdom crosstalk was a taboo before. It could not be done, but they found out that there are certain things that are budding off the bacteria called outer membrane vesicles that contain RNA that can then fuse with the intestinal cells and control the epigenome of the intestinal cells. So, and that's why they won their Nobel. This is big, you know, from one kingdom talking to another kingdom. And so here's the new Vitruvian man and the new holobiont, you know, human cells communicating with microbiota and other bacteria. That pathway has already been proven, and people are looking now for fungi and viruses affecting human cells, and also the food that you eat, producing outer membrane vesicles that, well, will communicate with your own body's cells. So clinical metabolomics paves the way towards future healthcare strategies. This is an older paper, actually in 2011. And I chose the metabolome over everything else, not the genome, because genomes can only tell us what can happen. Transcriptomics, or RNA, can show us what appears to be happening. Proteomics, or the proteins, what makes it happen. But metabolomics is what is essential for the clinics, right? What has happened and what is happening now, because we need the intervention now. So the metabolome refers to a complete set of small molecule metabolites, such as metabolic intermediates, hormones, and other signaling molecules, and secondary metabolites to be found within a biological sample. If you take a look at this tetrahedron right here, you could see that the farther you move away from the genome, the more you could see the physiological influences and the environmental influences are on the client or on yourselves. So this is an overarching summary of health optimization medicine. So essentially in illness medicine, you take a look, you're suspecting a particular pathology. For example, you're looking at fasting blood glucose and HbA1c, and you're suspecting diabetes. And those are what we call disease markers. And you institute appropriate disease management, right? So illness medicine clinical practice is you diagnose and treat diseases, right? But actually technology has already moved forward so beyond this that there are actually metabolic biomarkers that we can check so we could actually institute appropriate health management before disease even sets in. And it turns out that these metabolites are actually influenced by genetics, such as your nuclear DNA, your mitochondrial DNA, your nucleic acids, your symbiotic partners, your mitochondria, which are your endosymbionts, your gut microbiota, which are your exosymbionts, your environment, the direct signals like your phototoxicity, light toxicities, indirect signals, and by circadian time and by evolutionary time. So this throw off a set of metabolites that we can then detect. So we detect the early onset of metabolic dysregulations, and this is the clinical practice of home, of health optimization medicine. We simply detect and correct imbalances. We make no claims, because we are looking not at disease entities, but we are just looking at the imbalances in your metabolic biomarkers. So if you want to affect the metabolome, then you use diagnostic metabolomics, right, to detect the biomarkers. And you could use therapeutic metabolomics. You could get the deficient vitamin, mineral cofactor, and so forth. If you want to influence the nuclear DNA or the mitochondrial DNA nucleic acids, then you use the science of epigenetics. If you want to influence the mitochondria and gut microbiota, you use the sciences of the bioenergetics and gut immune system. If you want to influence direct and indirect signals from the environment, then you use the science of exposomics. If you want to influence time, circadian and evolutionary time, then you use the sciences of evolutionary medicine and chronobiology. Note that these are subjects that are not taught in medical schools, and these are the 7 pillars of health optimization medicine. We did try to introduce bioenergetics, but there was simply no time to teach it to medical students. So metabolomics, epigenetics, bioenergetics, gut immune system, exposomics, evolutionary medicine, and chronobiology are the 7 pillars of health optimization medicine. And I put them in a framework because how can we make this relevant in the clinics? So illness medicine diagnoses and treats disease. Health optimization medicine, home, and health optimization practice, HOPE, detects and corrects imbalances. Currently, the imbalances are corrected at the level of the metabolome, for example, nutrients and hormones. But that doesn't preclude us from testing anything else smaller than the metabolome when the technology comes. I've been asked before, what if you want to detect things at the subtle energy level? Sure, give me a diagnostic device that actually works. And then we could probably start using it in that particular level. So people say, I want to get healthy. And if you ask doctors what's the meaning of health, they can't even define it. I also challenge them to define medicine, and they can't even define it. So this is a simple definition of health that I give away. Please carry it with you. It's very simple. It's A plus B plus C. So health is an optimal physiologic state characterized by A, the absence of disease, which is the purview of illness medicine, and B, the maintenance of balance between anabolism, which are processes that make things grow, and catabolism, which are processes that destroy. Like, for example, when you eat, your food gets catabolized, right? According to C, the cycle of life of the organism, and this is the purview of health optimization medicine. Meaning, just because you're not sick does not mean that you're well. It only means that you're not sick. Now, fitness, I see many clients who say, how's your husband? Oh, doctor is very fit. It's wrongly equated with health. It's not. Fitness is an optimal physiologic state that allows one to handle stress, physical, emotional, and mental, from a baseline state according to the life cycle of an organism. An easy way to remember this is that I may be healthy, but I'm not fit to run a marathon, and you may be fit to run a marathon, but you're not healthy, right? Or for the legal types here, you're not considered mentally healthy to stand trial, you're considered mentally fit to stand trial. So the question actually, being physically, emotionally, and mentally fit, asks one question: fit for what? If you take a look at the Viagra advertisement, make sure that you're fit for sexual activity. See? So the clinical practice of health optimization medicine, the science is to measure the metabolite levels, especially of the nutrient and hormone networks, because that's what we have right now. The art is to balance the nutrient and hormone networks using the active form of the nutrients. For example, instead of giving folic acid, we give you methyl tetrahydrofolate because it takes about 4 enzymatic steps to actually get there. So we just give you the methyl tetrahydrofolate because it turns out that 40% of the world population cannot actually cleave folic acid to tetrahydrofolate, and still we continue enriching our foods with $2 billion worth of folic acid. And I use bioidentical hormones, those that are identical to what the body uses. To the metabolite levels found at ages 21 to 30 years old, meaning the optimal range, meaning that home does not use the standard reference range for a given disease. An example for this is when clients come to me and say, oh, my thyroid hormone is normal. It may be normal, but it's not within the optimal range, right? Because if you take a look at how the thyroid hormone values were derived, you could see that they were derived from 1,000 values from age 4 to 94. Seriously, would you take your optimized health levels from that particular cohort? Now, so this is a simple graphic, measure the levels of metabolites compared to optimal ranges and balance using network-wide range shiftings. In other words, I cannot just give you testosterone alone. I have to take a look at all your other hormones, because if you touch one node, everyone else will move. Same thing with your nutrients, right? You cannot overdose on vitamin E because you know that everything else in that particular network will have to be moved. So I'm always asked whether or not, by illness medicine doctors, whether or not my practice is evidence-based medicine. And the answer is actually no. It's evidence-informed, individualized care. In this landmark editorial in 2011, it shows models in the balance, evidence-based versus evidence-informed, individualized care. It chronicles the rise and fall of evidence-based medicine because of the rise of person-centered clinical medicine. And I would like to note that person-centered clinical medicine, for example, in illness medicine, has found its home in oncology, right? Where you could now determine the proper cocktail to work for you based on your genetic analysis. So I devised a health wrench, and it's very simple to understand. So health is the optimal physiologic state characterized by A, the absence of disease, which is illness medicine. Now, what are these? It's allopathic medicine, it's Western medicine as practiced today. Alternative medicine, these are alternative ways of diagnosing and treating disease. Complementary medicine, complementary ways of diagnosing and treating disease. Integrative medicine and functional medicine, which are integrative and functional ways of diagnosing and treating disease. Now, we'll flip that over. So we have a wrench. And when you just detect borderline deficiencies and subtle toxicities, according to the cycle of life of the organism, then you're dealing with health optimization medicine. So in other words, illness medicine uses quantitative statistics. We use qualitative statistics. Illness medicine uses evidence-based illness medicine. It's not really EBM, it's EBIM, because your antibiotics have to work across populations, right? But we use evidence-informed medicine, or EIM, evidence-informed individualized care. Now, just to differentiate us, we're always being confused with functional medicine. We're not, we don't deal with illness, but let me just tell you what a functional test is. For example, if as a substrate A needs to get an enzyme to get converted to substrate B and then to C and then to D, then you need a sufficient nutrient to get from A to B. Then you could easily measure that if, for example, A rises, like in the case of vitamin B9, right, tetrahydrofolic acid, formimidoglutamate, for example, if you lack vitamin B9, cannot get transformed to glutamate, right? So the level of formimidoglutamate will rise. It's very simple, a very simple concept. Now, so Home Hope is not functional medicine because this is at their website. It says it determines how and why illness occurs and restores health by addressing the root causes of disease. Again, it's disease-based. Trust me, guys, it took me 3 years to get my head removed from illness medicine. God knows I did a lot of it. So the clinical practice of health optimization medicine is illness medicine diagnoses and treats disease. Health optimization medicine detects and corrects imbalances. Illness medicine does disease management. We use health management. Illness medicine is after lifespan. We're after health span. So there's a Greek myth. Eos is the goddess of dawn, and she's an immortal. So and Tithonus is the son of the king of Troy, and he's human. He said, please, Eos pleaded, let my beloved Tithonus live forever. Her eyes filled with tears, her skin flushed, and even Zeus was moved. And so he granted her request. Now Tithonus was immortal. Tithonus would live forever, but even Zeus didn't have the power to make him a god. And so as time passed, Tithonus, like all mortals, began to age. First, Eos noticed the wrinkles upon his brow, and as the years passed, his muscles began to grow weak. His arms and legs grew slender, his hair grew gray and thin. Even the light of his beloved Eos no longer gave him the strength it once had. Eos could bear this no longer, and so she used her powers to transform the shell of the man into a cicada. She watched as he emerged from the ground, his body pale but fresh, as he shed his old skin, wings spreading where once there were arms, and that voice singing on and on and on. And what was he singing? I want to die, I want to die, I want to die. So the moral of the story, if you ask for immortality, don't forget to ask for eternal youth. Illness medicine asks for immortality or longevity, right? Health optimization medicine and practice asks for eternal youth or healthiness. So this is a clinical framework to include health management in disease management practice. I usually present this to physicians that is really very simple. If you take a look at the center column, there is a level of optimal wellness for everyone else. And on either side, you're unwell, but you're not sick. And you can detect the subtle toxicities and borderline deficiencies via a clinical metabolomics laboratory. Gone are the days when you could smell a disease. You can't anymore. When you're dealing at the cellular level, you have to use the laboratory. And you balance by influencing the metabolites, genes, symbionts, environment, and time, and give a health management plan after you detect and balance. Now, what I want to happen is that illness medicine doctors would include this in their disease management practice as a health management practice, so that you provide a complete spectrum of care. Now, we are not diagnosing or treating any diseases with home. We are detecting simply subtle toxicities and borderline deficiencies in the metabolomic network and balancing them to optimal levels. In other words, when you come to us, we set your diseases aside. We only take a look at what your cell is presenting to us. So updates. In the Philippines, we are on our 5th year in providing what I call continuing basic medical education, CME. I got insulted one time when I was applying for CME credits for a lecture I was giving, and I said it was going to be in mitochondria, and they said, oh no, that's basic, doctors should know that. And they did not allow the credit. So I said, okay, we're going to start continuing basic medical education, right? We had Dom D'Agostino, who's probably familiar with many of you, lecturing on emerging applications for nutritional ketosis last year. And we also had Lucia Aronica, who developed the curriculum for Stanford in Epigenetics, lecturing on the new science of epigenetics, why genes are not your destiny. BioBalance, a company, opened its doors 4 years ago, and is proof of concept that the Home Hope clinical framework works and is a financially viable model for physicians and practitioners. I figured that if we have to sell this concept to the practitioners and the physicians themselves, then it has to be financially viable for them. So there's a BioBalance Home Hope Clinic. The detection of imbalances is done by Genova Diagnostics here in the United States. We have about a 2-week turnaround time. We still send our samples here. And as I like to joke around there, since we send stool samples back here, it's the only way we could send shit back to the United States. Now, for the correction of imbalances, you take note that there are packets, morning, noon, and evening packets. These are customized packets for you, okay? For the dose that you need. If you don't need anything, it's not there. If you need it, then it's there at the proper dose. We now have, I call them sextuplets instead of quadruplets, all double board certified in anti-aging medicine and nutritional medicine in Europe. We are looking now to register the clinical practice professionally as a fellowship that can be promoted for adoption by 10 ASEAN countries, since we have no baggage. As the ASEAN countries now are looking to standardize everything. And it turns out you only need 5 specialists to start a specialty. So we're right there. In other words, we are moving forward to become a medical specialty. We are not a franchise like functional medicine. Now, these are my original 4 2 years ago, and this was just last summer. I had an additional 2 certified in Brussels. We now have a metabolomics lab positioned to serve ASEAN countries that soft opened in July 2018. There are less than 10 comprehensive clinical metabolomics laboratories worldwide. So if this is to take root, then we should develop the proper laboratories for it. And this was it. It was also one of my projects over there. And I said we soft opened this July. and we are positioning ourselves to serve the ASEAN countries. In North America, the Health Optimization Medicine and Practice Association was launched as a US nonprofit organization with an inaugural lecture in San Francisco in April 2018. We have a website, healthoptimizationmedicine.org. Our simple steps 1, 2, 3. In North America, the online training course in Basic Health Optimization Medicine and Practice will be launched in January 2019, this month, and it will be available worldwide. Its first course module in Clinical Metabolomics is now qualified to grant 45 CME credits, yay, for physicians upon module completion. So the home certification modules are of Clinical Metabolomics, Chronobiology, Exposomics, Epigenetics, Evolutionary Biology, Bioenergetics, and the gut immune system. And that's just for the basic home course. So for Europe, I presented the framework in October 2017 at the conferences by the World Mitochondria Society and the International Society of Microbiota in Berlin. And we have continuing presence in these conferences. In 2018, the World Society of Mitochondria in Berlin and the International Society of Microbiota in Porto. And here I am with my co-speaker, with the president of the World Mitochondria Society and the scientific chair last October. And here we were in Porto with the president and also the scientific chair. In Europe, we have been challenged by International Society of Microbiota to host in Manila the first World Congress in Health Optimization, Medicine, and Practice in a joint congress in 2020. We might accept the challenge with enough donations from end sponsors. We're extremely proud to have pioneered health optimization, medicine, and practice in the Philippines 9 years ago. Now we're going global. Please donate to Health Optimization Practice Association so we can continue with our mission to educate physicians and healthcare practitioners in health-managed and not just disease-managed medicine. Please email Sarah at snhlife.com. Sarah is the daughter of my brother over there and his lovely wife. Now, I'd like to end this lecture with the most difficult question asked of me in a lecture so far. How do you include spirituality in the health optimization medicine framework? And you guys are from California. You're familiar with DMT, the spirit molecule. And so I said, lack of spirituality is a DMT deficiency syndrome. And the one-cent solution to enlightenment is give DMT in the proper and legal set and setting. If you have any further questions about this lecture, even after this question and answer portion, you can email me at drted@snhlife.com. Thank you.
All right, do we have any questions? Okay.
Do you have a website for further information?
Scott can answer it.
Oh, sorry.
The website is healthoptimizationmedicine.org, all spelled out.
Okay. There was a hand right there. Okay, thank you.
How do you determine the optimal levels of different metabolites?
We send the blood, urine, and stool samples to a Clinical Metabolomics laboratory. And then what we do is we take a look at the range, but there are three competing standards for optimal range. And the first one is Terry Hertog's, which is I call the Hertog range, which is the mean at 25 years old, plus or minus 2 standard deviations. And then there is Mark Gordon's, who is an American, who says that it's the median, okay, at age 25. And there is the Achacoso range, which is the 50th to 75th percentile of range of values from between ages 21 to 30. Now, the earliest detectable decline of hormones is actually in men is at 30 when it starts going down. And therefore, my upper limit for that is 30.
How can you account for
Okay, let me have a follow-up. Let's have a follow-up question here, and then I'll come down there.
So can the median be misleading? For example, many people who are like trying, for example, the ketogenic diet, they would have high LDL, and that's it's not clear whether that would be a problem. So, so the median values can be problematic because these people are doing something that nobody else, that the general population is not doing.
What we do is we take a look at your metabolites. First, we take a look at your general lifestyle factors. And then when we see anything that's flagged in your metabolites as imbalanced, then we go back to you when you return, and we probe deeper into your lifestyle factors. As you know, the famous, very long intake form of functional medicine, right? It's like multiple pages long. But we only have a very short intake on your lifestyle, your sleep, your eating habits, your hydration habits, whether or not you sun yourself, whether or not you ground yourself, whether or not you have toxic relationships, and so on. We go through that just on your one typical day. And then based on metabolite tests, we go back and examine further what's going on with you.
Okay. Another question? There was someone down here?
Yeah, how do you
Hang on just a moment. Let me.
It's being recorded.
How do you account for ethnic differences?
That is actually one of the projects that I have right now, is that we are developing the set for the Philippines. I'm encouraging other countries to do the same because the optimal ranges, as we suspect, will vary from country to country or from different ethnicities.
Okay.
Do you have any solutions or guidelines for Crohn's disease?
We don't do diseases, unfortunately, but that question can be answered by the next speaker because he's going to speak on gut health.
Okay, good.
Hello. Do you just take one sample of urine, blood, and poop, or do you take it at different times of the day? Doesn't that affect your metabolites as what time of day?
Yes, it does.
Things like that.
So we just go by a standard time because we do what's practical, right? And so far, from the 9 years of experience that we have, it works. So, but the important thing is a follow-up. In the first year, we follow you up quarterly, and then from the second year onwards, then every 6 months or so.
Okay.
Okay, I'd like to ask you a question. So. You just used the term "it works," and so in the sort of traditional in the traditional model, someone would come with a disease, and then if it worked, you'd say they came out without the disease.
Yeah.
So how do you measure success? What's your?
It's the metabolite levels. If you are able to balance out the metabolite levels to the optimal levels, then that's considered success. And what usually happens is, either your diabetes goes away, your hypertension needs less meds, etc. But I call those beneficial side effects. We don't look at those. We work with your illness medicine doctors, so that when your blood pressure drops too low, we say, would you like to consider cutting your blood pressure medications? If the blood sugar now is becoming too low, then we talk to your endocrinologist and say, can you please decrease the diabetes medications? So we consider those illnesses. And that's why we don't alienate illness medicine doctors. The more we balance the metabolites, the more they see that they have better results from their drug therapy or post-surgically. So it's been a long time where initially there was much resistance with what I was doing. I would get phone calls, something like, Dr. Ted, how is your vitamin, mineral, and cofactor supplementation going to affect my drug levels in my patient? And I go, excuse me, your drug has never been seen by my client in evolution, but it has seen the vitamins, minerals, and cofactors in evolution. So you tell me how your drug therapy is going to affect the vitamin, mineral, and cofactor level in the patient.
Sorry, I have a question. On one of your last slides, I noticed a supplement ALA. I don't know if it was by accident that you put it there. It's a 200 milligram of ALA. Is that something that you sort of incorporate in your practice?
Oh, only if the ALA is actually needed. That was a test result. That was a test result. The patient had the client had a very high need for alpha lipoic acid, and the recommendation is 200 milligrams. You can distribute it during the day if you want to do so. But this is what I explain to people, that your question is actually very relevant, because ALA is actually a prescription hypoglycemic in Europe, right? It will drop your blood sugar. So because we are such a high carb society, high refined carb society, not a high fiber carb society, but a high refined carb society, so much of the clients actually require ALA not only for its cofactor and antioxidant effects and detoxifying effects. For example, if you have a lot of selenium, you need ALA for the processing, right? Is that it will also stabilize the blood sugar of the client. So right now, I'd like to tie this into, like, okay, metformin is an anti-aging drug because it lowers blood sugar and so on and so forth. Yes, it will work for this particular epoch in time because we're eating so badly. We're eating so much refined carbohydrates. But before that, when people were eating on a paleo schedule, etc., it wouldn't work, right? So we have to have a longer view of these things. I just wanted to piggyback on your question.
No, because ALA is also a sort of a chelator for mercury.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So if it's not taken in a strict protocol, it's kind of dangerous, especially on a high dosage like that.
No, not really. Many of my clients are on 200 milligrams after meals. And
then you have redistribution of mercury then? Because it binds to mercury.
No, it depends on whether or not where the toxicities are. That's why you also test for the toxins, right?
Not convinced about that.
Okay. I'm going to have more questions. Let's see. I'm going to sort out up here, and then here, and then there.
Oh, just one point. You add selenium in order to stabilize the membrane so that the toxins won't leach out. You're afraid of methyl mercury going to the brain and so on. So you want to stabilize it, and usually the stabilizing agent you want to do is selenium.
Okay, hang on, I got to get this. So we get this for the recording, thank you.
So I was just referring to Andy Cutler, chelation protocol, where he sort of identify alpha lipoic acid as it being sort of a chelator. And if it's not taken on a strict protocol, it's actually extremely dangerous.
That is looking at it from a disease perspective, right? We're looking at it from a balancing perspective. We are not trying to actively detoxify you and take it out of there, because removing mercury, which is actually more dangerous from inside your cells, actually more dangerous than removing it. Right? Than keeping it there, because you want to keep it stable. And the way you keep it stable is you give selenium at a higher dose, like 200 micrograms, and it stays inside the cell. My big fear about mercury is the formation of methylmercury. If you're looking at chelation, then you're looking at actual toxic poisoning. These are just subtle toxicities. These are not full-blown toxicities.
Okay, back here.
I'm Pete Humphreys, Advanced Space Manufacturing Systems. Full disclosure, I don't know anything about medical. I do aerospace engineering, but what I do know is that NASA's been doing a lot of work in this area, and I've met a few biotech girls that like to play with creepy crawlies, and they tell me that they can take a stem and using no G, twist it and bring it back down to earth and solve a lot of what you're discussing, diseases. So you can get rid of cancer, breast cancer, and all this, all to your gene cell up in space. So I wonder if you've looked into that. If not, why not?
I'm afraid you have me stumped with your question. No, I haven't looked at it, and we're simply introducing this right now to help physicians and health practitioners incorporate the practice of clinical metabolomics into their practice. So we'll deal with people here on Earth first.
Yeah, but you go up, you're using cell
Hold on, sorry.
You're using everything that was developed in space and you're using it now. Okay, so like you're disruptive in what you're trying to do, everybody takes for granted that they're using stuff from space. So you send something up to space and you can twist the gene cell and bring it back down. That's from what I've learned as a layperson. So you take it up, take the stem, bring it back down like the spice trade, and you've solved a big problem.
Okay.
Hi, I can imagine that pharmaceutical companies are not going to be thrilled with the success of your approach because there's nothing in it for them. And just like with homeopathy, for example, they're after homeopathy, trying to shut it down the production and make it much more difficult to practice here. Like what would be your marker and what are your plans when you become big enough to really be a threat to the all-powerful pharmaceutical industry?
Actually, what's interesting is that I consult for the largest privately owned pharmaceutical company in Asia, and I was responsible for turning their company around from pharmaceutical products into the direction more of healthcare. And they do realize that drugs are very difficult to come by nowadays. And it's very expensive to test. And they have very poor track record at chronic diseases. So chronic diseases. So for things like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and so on, you could see all the studies today are on lifestyle rather than on drugs because there's no one single drug that can actually treat multifactorial chronic disease. Especially chronic neurodegenerative diseases, which are very prevalent.
Okay, I want to take 2 more questions, and then we'll go ahead and have our break. If you have more questions you'd like to talk with Dr. Ted about that, I'm sure he'd be willing to talk to you during the break. So, right here.
Okay, I'd like to rephrase my previous question. You know, for Crohn's disease, a patient that have a bacterial imbalance in his gut, can you do something to shift his balance?
Yes, we can affect the populations of bacteria inside the gut. But that's only part of the equation. You have to strengthen the gut lining. You have to retrain the immune system. There are many things that you need to do. A friend of mine who is an adult, the expert in the world expert in fecal microbiota transplant, for example, we just totally replace it with a fecal microbiota transplant, right? But it's a multifactorial solution where you could affect all of these things. In fact, it's been shown that, for example, in the elderly, age 70 and above, it takes only about 24 to 72 hours for the gut bacteria to change, depending on your diet.
24 what?
24 to 72 hours for your gut bacteria to change.
Pretty cool. Okay, last question.
How complete is the database? So you can say, okay, if you could read basic science, here we have some kind of a database with all of the metabolites and all of what the optimum ranges are and all the things you got to do to normalize those 42 metabolites where you're a little bit different on. No illnesses, but you know things aren't quite perfect ever because we're all aging. So how close are we to having that complete database so a reasonable person in this room can get a 85% by themselves going through all the data and understanding what to do?
The database is ready now. It's clinically applicable already. What we're monitoring is exactly how fast the database is growing with the addition of new metabolites. And most of them are toxins. And those are some of those things we don't know what to do.
Is that available to casual people?
It's actually, the database is free.
Where?
It's
at the website?
No, the Human Metabolome database. You can take a look at that.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, let's thank Dr. Head Achacoso.